9 o'clock. Mark, do you want to take roll call?
Sure. Chair, Patricia Trout.
Present.
Vice Chair, Mark Truska. Present. Andy Bowden.
Present.
DJ Taylor.
Present.
All present. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, thanks for being here. Today at 10:30, we're going to have a public forum. You're all aware of that. And we'll be receiving comments regarding education experience. And it may end up expanding a little bit. You can tell from the letters that we received that there were a cross-section of letters addressing other items. So, and you know, just with regard to the schedule, we're going to allow as much time as we need for this forum. So we may not get through all of our agenda items, in which case we'll just table them to our next meeting. Let's see, we'll take a short lunch break. We have we're going to be finishing at 1:30 because all of our staff didn't have a lot of options as far as flights back, so we need to kind of wrap it up at 1:30. Okay, let's see, is there any items that people would like to rearrange on the agenda?
No. I've done.
What's that?
I've done.
Yeah, okay, very good. Then item C, let's see. Is there any members from the public that would like to introduce themselves?
Hi, my name is Dustin Maxim, and I'm a registered landscape architect in the state of Nevada, who lives and works primarily in California.
Jim McKell, I'm president, landscape architect, president of the California Council of the American Society of Landscape Architects.
Okay. Okay. So then agenda item D, will someone make a motion to approve the January 17th and 18th minutes?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the minutes.
I have a second.
And I'll second that. Roll call. DJ Taylor.
I'll abstain as I did not attend that meeting.
Andy Bowden.
Aye.
Mark Truska. Aye. Patricia Trout.
Aye. Good, very good. Okay, so let's see, agenda item E, program manager's report on illustration, examination, licensing, and enforcement. Yeah?
Yes, thank you. So my understanding with the program manager report is that we're doing it a little differently than done in the past, whereby the LATC started submitting monthly reports to the committee about 3 months ago. So because that is the most robust and up-to-date information on what's going on in the community, that is what's included in this packet. Also included in attachments is the meeting notice for the Architects Board March 2nd, 2017 meeting, which Andrea was attendance form. So starting, you'll notice the monthly report covers both board updates as well as LATC. LATC starts on page 10, and because much of what's talked about here is what's going to be talked about today, I'll just offer a high level, kind of pick out some key points. If there's anything you have questions about, please feel free to stop me. But starting with personnel, a couple of, I guess I'll start with the obvious, which is that the program manager position was filled by me. I'm happy to be a part of the team. It started on March 13th, and so while I'm still fresh, I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate all of your patience with me as I learn. Another hire that was made was Stacy Townsend. She previously was our licensing coordinator, and effective, I think, April 10th, she was promoted to enforcement analyst. So we're very excited for Stacy. Congratulations to her. And we are undergoing efforts to backfill her position right now. And then last but certainly not least is Gretchen right here. I think I've been with the LATC for quite some time.
Yes, since since October 28th of 2013.
Wow. Yeah, and so Gretchen will be leading us effective April 30th. So very sad to see you go. With regard to outreach, we have the fax number and licensee search were updated on the website. The big outreach point is also the consumer guide, but that'll be presented later today, so I'm not going to go into detail on that. Moving on to regulations, again, much of the regulations will be talked about, the active regulatory proposals will be talked about today. So the only one I will highlight is the fee regulation proposal, CCR 2649, which is notated on page 13 of the monthly report. That is an active proposal to extend what was effective July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2017 to reduce the renewal fees from 400 to 220 because of a rather extensive fund reserve. We're seeking to extend that from, I believe, July 1st, 2017 through June 30th, 2019. So where we're at right now is because that July 1st is rapidly approaching. We're near the end of the review process, I believe, but because the review process is extensive, staff is working on submitting a letter to request expedited approval. So we're trying to get that date. Beyond that, I'll cover enforcement, which is on page 16 and 17 of the monthly report. Again, disciplinary guidelines will be covered later during this meeting, but the enforcement matrix on page 17, you'll see fiscal year to date, we've received 17 complaints, 4 received during the month of March, and we have, as of March, 12 pending. That's the report.
Okay. Very good. Any questions? Comments? Okay, agenda item F, review of possible action to approve 2017-18 intra-departmental contract with the Office of Professional Examination Services for California Supplemental Exam Development. Courtney?
Hi. So I'm Courtney Nation, the exam analyst with LATC. The OPES, which is the Office of Professional Examination Services, is charged with providing the professional psychometric services to DCA boards and bureaus, which include all aspects of the examination validation process, including the occupational analysis, exam development, test scoring, statistical analysis, and national examination reviews. And currently, right now, our last exam development contract with OPES is expiring on June 30th. So what's included in this packet is the new proposed contract, which would be for fiscal year 2017 through 18 for continued exam development. What this contract outlines is what's required to roll out one new exam format of the California Supplemental Exam. So this is the same as what we did last year.
Any comments? Yes.
I have a question for you. Is it, will OPES have the latest version of the CSE completed by the time this next exam
By the time it starts?
This expires? So by June 30th, 2018, we'll have the CSE.
Yes, there is already, I don't think it may already be completed, yeah. It will roll out in September
This year?
of this year.
Of
And
this
so
year.
this new exam format will roll out next September.
Okay. Thank you.
And is that something that the board or the committee gets a copy of?
The exam format,
Yeah.
it's confidential. So it's
There's
reviewed.
a reason for that, I think. I'm looking at Rebecca. Yeah. Okay. I was just curious. So how does it get updated, as long as we're just kind of talking about this?
So what's outlined in the contract is 6 workshops. So 3 of which would be item writing and 3, or I believe it's 2 item writing, 2 item review, so test question writing and then test question review. They're done by different SMEs, the subject matter experts. We recruit different SMEs for each workshop. So the SMEs who write the items will not be the same ones reviewing them. And then once the items are worked out after those 4 workshops, the new format will be developed. And there's 2 workshops for that. So the one workshop is the exam format developing, and then the second workshop is determining the passing score.
And it's all based on a recent applicational analysis, which is done, I think, in 5 years. And so that's what the test questions are coming from, is the most recent applicational analysis.
Okay. So, let's see, so I guess I need clarification, are we voting on this? Someone want to make a motion?
Sure.
Go ahead.
I would move that we approve the 2017-2018 interdepartmental contract with OPES, the California Supplemental Examination Development.
Second.
Roll call. DJ Taylor.
Aye.
Andy Bowden.
Aye.
Mark Truscott. Aye. Patricia Trout.
Aye. Okay, agenda item G. Let's see, update and possible action on council landscape architectural registration board for our March 27th webcast and year review. And draft changes to model law and landscape architect registration examination, administration and pass rates.
Okay, so CARB held its mid-year meeting in this webcast, webinar type of formatting on March 27th, 2017, and topics really surrounded the current regulatory environment, which we've heard as the national accrediting regulation, as well as mitigating barriers to licensure. And then the other big item during that meeting was introducing the new draft model law. And that draft is included in the attachments for this section along with the current model law. We didn't really delineate point by point things that we wanted to focus on, mostly because it was a very significant change that we confirmed. So those are included for comparative purposes in there. The CARB annual meeting will be held on September 14th through 16th in Boise, Idaho. And during that time, members will be voting to approve the draft model law. And so staff has submitted an out-of-state travel request to get LATC representation at that meeting. So we're waiting. It's going through the approval process now, but we're hoping to have representation there. And then lastly highlighted in this section are the LAIR results. The LAIR, 2 points. The LAIR was administered March 27th through April 8th, and those results will be released in May, so that's the most recent administration. What you have as attachment 3 are the results for the December 5th through 17th administration. So in attachment 3, as I believe it always will, it shows the results for...
What page are you referring to?
Well, attached, it's not the page number, it's not the page of the section.
Okay.
Sure. And so what that shows, I believe, is California rates versus national rates. Questions about these?
Chair?
Yes.
So these are just the draft regulations that the CARB has put forward.
Right.
Is my understanding. And that they're going to review and vote on this new update in September. So really until then, this is just more informational for us
Right.
until they actually physically evaluate. Is that
Right.
correct?
That's correct.
Thank you very much.
I have a question as well, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I participated, there was a webinar, a web call that was, anybody else on the LATC on that call?
The March one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I was just curious if anybody else had a chance. It seems pretty straightforward.
You want to give us a little synopsis?
Well, I mean, it's all here. I mean, it's pretty lengthy. It just seems in listening in that it's nothing racially flagging. But there's
It's my understanding that the intent is to try to draft something that all the jurisdictions across the country could adopt. There's no requirement that they have to adopt this. It's just, this is the model that if it was a perfect world, that all jurisdictions would start to mirror. Some will, some probably won't, but there are pieces of this that could be picked up. I think that's what they're intending to do. We're trying to get parity as much as possible across all boards,
Which makes sense.
which makes sense. It's a lot easier.
Yeah. Now,
Maybe you could comment on, I don't recall ever getting a request for input from California on this, and I was rather surprised when they released the draft that they didn't ask the states to make comments.
I did reach out to Claude staff, and they said they would send something out in May.
In May, okay. Because normally when you send out a draft, then people are going to be voting on it, and you ask for input on your draft. And we didn't get it, so it's coming in May.
yeah, no, I was glad we got a copy of it because I called Clark and asked for it, and they hadn't sent it to me, so I'm glad you guys were fortunate enough to get a copy.
I think this is only just released, just as the last couple of weeks.
And one of the letters that we received referenced it, so that's why I was trying to get a copy, so I sent it to you. Yes.
So if we're going to be asked for any input in May, does the community have any preference on how we go about that? Being you're not going to be meeting again until what, July?
Well, it was my understanding that they're not voting on it until September, so I would think that we would be able to still give them comments in, June, July.
Was there a window that they wanted their feedback on?
She didn't let me know, but they said they would reach out to all member boards sometime in May and ask for feedback.
So I prefer to do it, in this kind of forum. If we can't, maybe we have a conference call, or are we allowed to have like a conference call? Or
Not necessarily do it,
Yeah.
which I prefer not to do between now and July. So,
Yeah,
I mean, if you have any issue with the draft, then you can maybe speak what it is now, and then when we get the opportunity to comment, we can work through you to respond to it if you guys have any issues with anything in the draft.
okay, but in the meantime, Courtney, could you contact Clark and find out if the comment period is, just not just May, but, if it can be extended to the end of July? And then we probably have a meeting in July, correct?
Right, I think that's the
Yes, July 13th.
Okay, great.
Sure.
Yes.
I believe the intent would be that our representative to the Clark meeting in September, that's when comments will be brought up, discussed.
Right, yeah.
That's what I think. I don't know if it would make sense to have a little subcommittee, made up of let's say 2 members, to review this and compare the existing model law with the proposed model law and see what changes there are, so that the next meeting that can be presented, or I don't know if any staff can do that. Because we're sitting there trying to compare, page by page.
Yeah.
It's a little arduous.
There really is no comparison. The old model law was very brief, let's put it. It's 5 pages. The new model law, what it looks to me is though they have taken several laws from different states and picked out what they wanted that thought would be appropriate for the model law. And put it together just like you would have a statute. You would have like the business and profession code. This is the language that you would use. As opposed to the old model law, which was just very, very broad. My concerns in reading this one is that we've gotten a lot of comments from people when we're talking about related degrees and reciprocity and other things that wait for the model law, wait for the model law, wait for the model law. Well, all the model law says is that you have to have education from an approved school. Well, that doesn't really define what an approved school is or what the education should be. So I'm curious. I think that the committee would be well served to get together and talk about what, be more specific about what your model law education is.
Yeah.
and experience. Same for, because this model law is extremely brief on what education and experience should be.
So that we could have a larger discussion in July, at our standard meeting. And then with the understanding that whoever goes to the club meeting in September can convey, all of our comments. Does that work for people?
And maybe Courtney can confirm, since she's in contact with Clara, if there are any dates for submitting comment to, so we can make sure we hit that also.
Right. Yeah.
But I too prefer to open forum rather than other methods of discussion.
Madam Chair, my suspicion is that come the annual meeting for CAR, it's going to be a hearing. I think they're going to be discussing it further at that point. And we should probably just confirm that with CAR, that if we're getting comments in, they're going to take that, they're going to synthesize that, and then it's a yes or no vote. Come the annual meeting, would be my guess.
Yeah.
Unless there's like some kind of action to make, I think that would be the case.
Yeah, I would think so, but we should have all our ducks in a row, and we should, prior to that, know exactly. But yeah, or you can kind of confirm those things. That'd be great.
So other than that, I don't think there was any action needed on the update on CAR and anything until there.
Okay, then let's see, moving to agenda item H. Discussion and possible action on LATC's draft consumer's guide to hiring a landscape architect.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If you would entertain, I would like to make a motion.
Okay.
I would like to move that we approve the draft consumer's guide to hiring a landscape architect.
Okay.
And I'd like to second the motion.
Okay.
Roll call. DJ Taylor.
Aye.
Andy Bowden.
Wait, hold on a second. It looks like you have public comment. You want me to call for it? I'm going to vote.
Okay, public comments.
Hi, Dustin Maxim. I think this is a great document. I'm totally happy with it. There's only one problem, and that's on the professional qualifications and requirements chart. It says that a landscape architect, page 7.
Okay.
So on page 7, it says that a landscape architect in California has to have a 4-year professional degree in landscape architecture. I think that should be amended to match more closely to what the architects or engineers say. Because we have associate's degrees, we have extension certificates. So
Right.
it's giving a misimpression to the public.
Okay, well, currently, that's the requirement. Now, there's obviously, even on our agenda today, we'll be discussing,
No, there's currently half the licensure for associates, 2-year degree,
okay, that's true.
and extension certificates.
Yeah.
If Courtney, maybe you could ask Courtney a question on this, but I believe if you modify that column, then don't you need to modify the experience column too? Can that be adjusted?
Yeah.
We could possibly add another. If the committee would like, we could add a note at the bottom to specify the additional pathways. But if we did change this box, we would need to change the experience as well.
So we might want to just footnote it because of the different ways that it would affect both columns.
Okay. Well, I'd like to open up to the board and see if they want to, expand the matrix or if they want to have it as a note at the bottom.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
The landscape architect's practice act, there's quite an extensive chart, and I was wondering, does that need to be reflected here? Because based on the public comment, that is a correct statement.
Yes.
There are multiple pathways,
Yeah.
and it's not just cut and dry before your degree is required. So there are other options, or the pathways that probably should be noted. on this chart.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I agree that we need to amend language to expand the thought. I'm concerned about the that much information on the consumer guide. We do reference the website. I think that we should footnote and make 3 asterisk, and footnote, make some changes to the language so it expands what we're seeing here, but doesn't go to the extent of the charts and the regulation.
That whole chart would have to be added?
Well, I'm just saying is that there are multiple factors, it's not like that.
I think Doug's having difficulty on the webcast hearing the DJ and Andy. Is that right, Doug?
Yeah, there's some significant time delay on the webcast. You guys are, well, what I have you on?
We're on H.
Okay, then I guess I'm close. One of the things you might need to do is the table that's in the consumer guide isn't intended to be like the full-on table equivalent, so it's really not necessary to amend the page to cover every possible contingency. It's a consumer guide, not a codified law that sets forth all our pathways.
Okay, so we have Doug Colley, who's the executive director of the Architects Board, on the phone for clarification.
I think we could make it more generic, if you wanted to do that, and just say a professional degree in landscape architecture or education in landscape architecture, as opposed to specifying line 2, 3, 1, 5.
I think,
I think I'm leaning kind of more towards what Mark and Andy are kind of referencing. So, having a third set of asterisks and referencing the document Andy that you just referenced.
If I may, I think that just to further that idea, if we put a 3 asterisk 40 personal agreement, basically refer to our business professions code,
Right.
saying there are other paths to professional landscape architecture. We confirm this.
Yeah.
I agree. This is a consumer's guide.
Right.
It is for presumably the layperson. I think in the big picture that there, I think it's just maybe this little bit of verbiage that could add.
Any more comments? Okay, I think that'll work to have that third asterisk in reference.
So, Madam Chair, would we send this back so we get amended before we vote on it?
Yes.
That is the appropriate way to.
if you're feeling comfortable with how you want us to amend it, we can amend it and then finalize it, or if you want it to come back, we can bring it back. But it's been going on quite some time.
I think it's important that we
Get it
document out.
Yeah.
The process.
I agree.
So maybe if you restate, DJ, how you
Yeah.
want to see that asterisk, that will help us.
I would move to approve what's presented here as a landscape architect, or consumer's guide to hiring a landscape architect, with the additional information that direct the consumer to refer to the business and professions code for the other paths for licensure.
So explicitly in terms of the document, are you suggesting an asterisk where it says CBP code or, I think the reg more specifically identifies the difference in the pathway. The regulation might be a more helpful indicator. And then since it is a consumer guide, it's supposed to be kind of handy, it might be helpful to actually include the language in some maybe synopsis way. I understand the reg is long, but in other words, the whole point is, oh, you've got this handy consumer guide with it, asterisks, so I'm supposed to go look at the law somewhere.
So have it like as an appendices?
I don't know, I'm just suggesting that the way to connote the information you're looking for might be a little more helpful to include a brief explanation right there.
I would contend though that again, this is a consumer's guide, most consumers won't bother going to look for that.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
And so this works, but I mean, if it's so explicit and actually transfer all this into this, I think it's conversation.
And I'm not suggesting you transfer everything in, but it sounds like you're trying to convey a specific piece of information, like it's not necessarily a 4-year degree, so that might be helpful to have right there.
Or maybe you could say something to the effect that refer to the regulation for other pathways for requirements to licensure. Something like that, and then you know that there's other experience and educational requirements that are allowed. Because I think it's explained it a bit more, it's going to be.
I agree, and I like 50 what you kind of suggested, so I would move to approve this consumer guide with additional language that we kind of discussed here that we can agree upon and work with staff to get that out.
So I just wrote down what you said, Vicki, so let me just read it. Refer to the regulations for other paths to licensure. Is that, should we say what regulation?
Maybe other experience education requirements.
Well, that would be in the regulations, right?
Yeah, to kind of give them the focus why they might go to that in a regulation.
Okay, so what did you just say?
For other pathways to licensure for experience and education requirements.
Other, okay, so,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I'm going to
I'm sure I got it. Shorthand's not my forte. Let's see, refer to the regulations for other paths to experience, licensure, and you said another thing.
Education and experience.
Experience and education. And licensure. Okay.
Specifically, that's section 2620.
A little louder, please. I can barely hear you.
Specifically, that's 2620.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's Title 16, CCR 2620.
Title 16, CCR 2620. Okay. I'm going to read it. I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, I think it is important that you include that information because this is kind of a living document. We have on our agenda other items that could impact that. You know, maybe whether we today or
Yes.
something else.
Yes.
So it's important that it be able to be modified or not be so
Specific. Yeah.
Right, yeah, that's a good point, because it may change if you are too specific, then you have to be copying.
Maybe updating it.
Sorry.
Maybe,
Okay.
yeah, less.
Okay. So, so let's see.
Is that an acceptable motion?
Yeah, I think, actually, who the second was they
I had seconded.
also second the amendment. I think that would work to allow you to call for comment from the committee and the public and then carry on with the vote.
And I will revise my second.
Okay. So let's see, comments from the public.
Sorry to cause you to agree, but
Yeah, it's good. You gotta get more involved. Okay, any other comments from the public? Okay, comments
Roll call.
Okay.
TJ Taylor.
Aye.
Andy Bowden.
Aye.
Mark Truska. Yes. Patricia Trust.
Yes.
Carries.
Okay, so I noticed a couple more people, additional people from the public have arrived. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
It's purely voluntary if
It's voluntary.
What does that mean to us?
I'm Christine Anderson. I'm a landscape architect, licensed landscape architect, also with CLAR, CLAR president-elect, and former member of the LATC, and also former member of the Education Subcommittee.
Stephanie Landrigan, licensed landscape architect, former member of the LATC, presently on the board of mining and geology, and head of UCLA Extension's landscape architecture program.
I'm Kelly Shannon, Director of the Graduate Program of Landscape Architecture and Urbanism at USC. I'm not a licensed landscape architect. I'm actually a registered architect in New York State.
I'm Esther Margulies, Assistant Director of the USC Master of Landscape Architecture and Urbanism Program. I'm a licensed landscape architect in California and Massachusetts, and I am the President of the West LA Area Planning Commission.
I'm Pamela Reeve. I'm a licensed landscape architect, and I'm president-elect for ASLA Southern California chapter.
Thank you. I'm Nikki Philippi, Executive Director with ASLA Southern California chapter.
Tracy Morgan Hollingworth. I'm the Executive Director of the California Council of ASLA, and I'm the Executive Director of the San Diego chapter of ASLA.
Welcome. Okay, so let's see, we're on, okay, so agenda item H, we just completed, okay, and so agenda item I, okay. Let's see, discussion and possible action to recommend to the board to amend LATC's disciplinary guidelines and Title 16 California Code Regulations, Section 2680, disciplinary guidelines. Brianna.
So my understanding is that the draft strategic plan before you today carries on an objective that's been a little bit ongoing to update the disciplinary guidelines for the LATC. This is going on for a couple of years now, whereby the LATC and the board are really trying to, well, rather the LATC is really trying to sync up its guidelines to be close to match those of the board. In 2015, I believe the board's guidelines went through some extensive legal review, and then at the board meeting held on December 15, 2016, the board voted to approve the disciplinary guidelines. So since that time, we've been trying to sync ours up to be closely matched with those. We had hoped to bring them to you today, but what we discovered was that some analysis perhaps was still needed to make sure that they are matching. We've got all our ducks in a row, so to speak, with it. So what we're seeking is to bring the guidelines at a later meeting, and at that time we'll have very clearly highlighted what changes have been made to it. And beyond that too, once those guidelines become before you all and if you vote to approve them, we wanted to just remind you that that approval will then necessitate a regulatory change to CCR section 2680 to update that the guidelines updated, so to speak. So we hope to bring that to you soon, but unfortunately it's not here today.
Any comments? Any comments from the public?
If you're voting.
Always. Okay. Let's see, so moving to agenda item J. And this is our public forum.
So we should probably hold off until 10:30 so that we can notice that.
Okay.
Maybe if you want to take some of the other items after that.
Okay. So we'll be waiting until 10:30 to start the forum, in case there's people that are still planning on attending. So we'll continue on with other agenda items. Okay, so agenda item K.
Sorry.
We were given
Okay, so discussion and possible action to recommend to the board to amend Title 16 CCR Section 2615 form of examinations regarding reciprocity requirements.
Can I ask a question here? Agenda items J, K, and L. J and K are kind of tied to each other. Do we want to do K after we talked about related degrees or not?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I would prefer wait on this item too.
Yeah.
Just wait on it.
And also 26, 2025 is probably a little bit tied to that, so those three items should come.
Can you increase your voice a little bit? It's Kim Belly here.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'll talk later. We were talking about agenda items. J, K, and L are closely aligned with one another. L not so much, but it will have some input on the education requirements. And so we should probably have those three agenda items after the public forum is heard, if that's okay with the LATC.
I'm in agreement.
Okay.
Maybe we did, and I'm not quite sure L needs to wait, but let's read it and now.
Okay, yeah, M. Yeah, okay. So let's get agenda item M. Review and possible action of draft 2017-18 strategic plan.
Okay, so for the strategic plan that you have before you today, it is the draft strategic plan based on the facilitated planning session that the committee kind of went with the BCA Solid Office on January 18th, 2017. And during that time, you all, as you probably well remember, brainstormed objectives that you want to see in this next 2-year planning period. So what you have before you today is the draft iteration of that. So what we ask is that you please review this, and then if the committee wishes to do so, offer approval.
Would the committee like 2 minutes to just kind of look at this? Or?
If we could,
Okay.
yeah.
Right, yeah, I definitely like to take a minute or two.
I have a question for Jan.
Yes.
Is it really important for us to pass this today?
Well, ultimately that's up to the committee. However, you are in your planning period now for the date of 2017-2018 period.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. And I should remind you too that during that planning session, the committee also did elect to revise. I don't think the mission statement is provision values perhaps for the 5 senators as well. So that would be part of this adoption process.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the Lansing Architect Technical Committee's strategic plan for 2017-2018 as presented.
I'm in support of it, but I wasn't at the meeting, so I don't feel comfortable making a percent motion.
I feel comfortable seconding the motion.
you want to comments? Yes.
You want to comment? I really appreciate your adding 3.6. I think when we talked in January, it's very frustrating to not be able to communicate, with licensees, or at least let them know what the opportunities are to, reach out. And I really appreciate your adding that section. Thank you.
Any additional comments on the topic?
Roll call.
Yes.
DJ Taylor.
Aye.
Andy Bowden.
Aye.
Mark Truscott, yes. Tricia Proud.
Yes. Okay, agenda item N. Review and confirm future LETC meeting dates. Okay. Okay, so our next meeting is July 13th. And the following meeting is November 1. And that's it for now.
Now, there's the board meeting in the town, on June 15th.
Yes.
I unfortunately will not be able to attend. I'm trying to hit all of the morning meetings.
Yeah.
I won't be able to attend that. I don't know if someone else can cover that one. We need to do that.
What day of the week is the 15th?
Thursday.
Graduation.
I might be able to.
And I might be able to as well. Do we ever, a question from the staff, does staff ever attend those on our end? I mean, it might be cheaper for someone on the staff to attend than for.
I think they always attend.
Yeah.
Okay.
It depends what's on the agenda for LHTC, but usually the program manager attends it. But part of prior meetings, what we've done is a member of the LHTC is there in case they want to report on something or provide comments on what the board is currently working on. I mean, we could put Andy down, and if Andy can't make it, and DJ can, that's fine. It's going to be at the Ford San Francisco.
And then I'll do the board meeting December 7th.
You'll do it December?
Yeah. Okay, then I think we'll take a brief break because we don't want to start our forum until 10:30.
Can I don't know if this is appropriate or not, since Christine came in and she's the president-elect of CLARB, would it be appropriate to ask her if there's going to be an opportunity and a window for input?
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. So, Christine, since you're here, we have a list of a couple of questions we wanted to ask Clark regarding the model law.
So this is with regard to item G?
Yes. Yeah. Item G on the agenda. So we were wondering what the review period was going to be. So, because we were told that it's in May, but our next committee meeting is in July, and so we still be expecting comments in July.
I am fairly certain that there will still be comments. I mean, I would definitely verify this with the CLARB staff members, but I would think that they're probably going to be accepting comments right up until the annual meeting in Boise, so in September. So comments will still be floating in at that point.
So Christine, at the September meeting, do you anticipate discussion and even debate about some issues, or do you think it's going to be fairly open?
I think the idea is to try to get discussion and debate started now, so that by the time we get to the September meeting, we can have those items hashed out and any revisions necessary to that so that we can, before the CLAR board can actually look at the final language and make some accommodations to those. I believe, I should state too that we do have a virtual board meeting in August that will probably take care of this. So I would think that, just thinking about the timing on this, I would think if you guys got your comments in, early August, I think that would probably be a good time.
The virtual board meeting, is there an opportunity for public comments? So,
No, our board meetings are closed, they're not public things, but we do accept comment at any time during that.
That was August, I'm sorry.
I don't know the exact date off the top of my head, and I don't believe that it's exactly been scheduled, but I'm sure it's late August is when we normally take our, it's like the last 2 weeks of August. We normally have our August virtual board meeting.
Well, we're planning on having it on our agenda for the July meeting, so. Discussion.
So can I just, if I may, so they made it's not a that meeting in Boise. It's not at that point going to be a yes or no vote on that.
Yes, it will be. So the Boise meeting will be an up or down vote on the change, on any further changes to the model law.
Great. Thank you.
Madam Chair, let me ask a question. So while you're receiving comments, is it possible the law will be changed during that comment period of time to reflect comments?
I believe that the model law will be changed one time after we receive all the comments. Once again, I would verify this with CLAR staff because I don't know the exact dates. I don't have them in front of me right now. Put me on the spot. But I would think that with the timeline from what I recall is that we've opened it up for comments at this point. We're basically taking comments up until we have our virtual meeting in August. And then at that point, any final changes would be made to the model law for presentation to the final
That makes sense.
board in the Boise team.
Any other comments? Thank you, Christine. Sorry, we'll put you in the hot seat.
That's all right. And you do have 40 minutes until the public forum if you want to take a look at the kinds of comments you might offer to CLAR on the model law. And if anything, then you can further refine them for your July meeting. But I think staff really work to try to prepare this now so that you're able to launch comments and input now.
nice ones.
So, you want to have a discussion? You want to take a break? 10-minute break.
Sure.
Okay, let's take 10 minutes. Then we'll come back and go to G.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to take a 10-minute break here. Okay, we're going to resume the meeting here. Okay, so agenda item G.
Madam Chair, I would request that we postpone discussing this item because of time limitation, 20 minutes, and plus, quite frankly, I'd like to have some quiet time, really thinking some of these things through before I offer comment.
Any other comments?
I would agree. In fact, if it's welcome, I would suggest maybe that we bring agenda item L for review that now this time before the forum.
That's actually all right, as long as you're done by 10:30 to go to the public forum.
Yeah, well, this agenda item L.
Just remember they need to listen to you, and they will complain louder, they cannot hear you. the size.
Speak up.
Please. You guys.
Okay, I'm just questioning whether or not we have enough time for L when we only have 20 minutes. Will 20 minutes be sufficient enough time to?
I have no idea, but I think that we were talking about J, K, and L, discussing all three of them during the forum, so.
After fall. The forum has been noticed to be
Okay.
specifically devoted to that purpose.
Okay.
We can certainly try, no?
Okay, and then if we need further discussion, then we will continue it after the forum. Okay? Okay, so agenda item L is discussion and possible action to recommend to the board to amend Title 16 CCR Section 2620.5 requirements for an approved extension certificate program. Okay. Gretchen?
Yes. Tell me if I'm not talking loud enough. It's usually not my problem. So we have two extension certificate programs here in California, one at the University of California, Berkeley, and one at UCLA. UCLA's program was established in 1976 and Berkeley was in 1982. Both of the extension programs are accredited under the universities in which they are housed by the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, and both of them are under their own universities' policies and academic standards. The former Board of Landscape Architects began granting educational credit for applicants who had completed the extension certificate programs in 1979, and actually was instrumental in getting the program started to begin with. In 1991, the former board adopted Title 16 California Code of Regulations, Sections 2620.5, which formally established the requirements to approve an extension certificate program. Prior to that, credit was given, but the board didn't actually have input into what was offered in the programs. So in 1991, the board established criteria for the extension certificate programs to follow, and they mirrored that criteria on the requirements of the Landscape Architectural Accreditation Board requirements. In 2009, and the acronym for that is LAAB, as I'm sure you all know, so I'm just going to call it that. So in 2009, LAAB implemented changes to its accreditation standards and changed some of the curriculum requirements. And to accommodate that, we proposed regulations in July 2012 to update our curriculum standards to reflect what LAAB was currently requiring, and also to change some terms from administrator to director, the number of full-time staff required, full-time equivalency, half-time, etc. We tried to do that, and in 2012 we proposed regulations to update our standards, and they were turned down by OAL because we did not demonstrate the necessity for making all the changes that we required. The Office of Administrative Law is the body within the state that has to approve all regulations. It's a very lengthy process. They have standards that we have to adhere to, and one of them is necessity, consistency. They have to be clear. They have to be easily understood, clear. But they have what we failed to meet was the necessity standard, and so our regulations were rejected. Now, I was going to actually read this, but now it's summarized, so I'm not quite sure where I am. So after the disapproval of the regulatory action for failing to meet the necessity, at its August 2013 meeting, the LATC voted to not pursue trying to fix the problem, to have staff analyze proposed modifications to the regulations and attempt to provide sufficient justification for each proposed change that will meet OAL standards. Staff met with the committee, and we tried to respond to OAL. We also, at the advice of legal counsel said if you're going to approve a school, you also need to have an approval process spelled out in regulation. You need to have an application process for anybody who wants to become approved. You have to have an appeal process if you end up having any type of disciplinary action or if you decide to withdraw your approval from that school. You have to have all this other stuff set forth in regulation to go forward. So we drafted, and you'll see it as attachment, subsections 2620.2, 3, and 4 to deal with the application process, the appeal process, the denial process, annual reporting, and it became very, very complicated. Even more complicated than just trying to update the curriculum requirements part of the plan. In the meantime, while we were drafting all this new language, LAAB changed their standards again, changed their curriculum standards again, which just took effect in 2016, March of 2016. And in those standards, they've gone from having 8 broad categories of subject areas that must be included in your curriculum, which we currently have identified in 2620.5, to 9 broad categories with 41 subcategories of curriculum that must be taught. So our problem as a board is, how do we possibly justify that? Is there a way to justify it? Is it needed? And so what we're looking at today is, catch up with myself. I mentioned that we've received a copy of their proposed revisions, which have significant changes. We've talked about the number of changes that exist now, and the difficulty it's going to be trying to get those, to justify them through the regulatory process. So what we're looking for now is guidance from the LATC on how to proceed. We know that the associate programs that currently get 1-year credit, they're housed in junior colleges, and they are strictly under the governance of that college that can extend it to whatever subcommittees they have. When the extension programs were first developed, they were developed by help me out here, Stephanie. I think they were developed by educators, members from ASLA. The Board of Landscape Architects retained a landscape architect to assist with the development process. But essentially, the curriculum was developed by the university itself. Correct. So what we're looking for is, since we approve associate degrees without telling them what their curriculum needs to be, and we accept degrees from non-approved schools that aren't approved, that aren't accredited by LAAB, but they are, USC, I believe, is one. I can't remember all of them. There are not that many that aren't accredited, but are that we approve credit.
Actually, USC is accredited.
Oh, they are accredited. Okay, forget it. It's not. But there is one. You said that. Yeah. I didn't write it down. So our thinking is, we don't tell other schools what their curriculum needs to be or set forth requirements. So how should we proceed? Do we want to go through the regulatory process and outline in regulation what should be included in the extension programs? Or what direction should we take? Should we revert back to allowing them to set their own curriculum requirements and just have the requirement that they be housed they be approved by the Western Association of Schools and Colleges or whatever appropriate education code was in effect at the time? Or do we want to modify this text and make it a little simpler? How exactly do we want to proceed with this? So today we're asking the committee to talk about it. At the last meeting, we were going to talk about this, and we received a letter from both Stephanie and from Eddie Chow, who's Berkeley, asking for the opportunity to have input into this process. And so Stephanie is here today. I'd like to give her an opportunity to speak. And we're looking for direction on modifications, additions, deletions. Exactly how do we want to proceed? With the thought that there's no intention of not giving credit for extension certificate programs or changing the amount of credit that's allowed. It's just how involved should we be in the process of how they run their program.
Okay. Stephanie, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair Todd, and committee members, and Gretchen. I think that was a good review. The actual approval process.
Excuse me, same thing for you. They cannot hear you in the back.
I'm sorry?
You have to be a little louder. They cannot hear you in the
Can you
back.
all not hear me in the back? That's weird. I'm Stephanie Landrigan. I'm the director of the Landscape Architecture Program at UCLA Extension.
Excuse me, Stephanie, before you go on any further, I have to declare that I have become possible conflict of interest. I'm chair of the guidance committee. So to excuse myself from this discussion, I want to make sure that it is correct. Is that correct?
Yes, and if you just want to excuse yourself from the dais, that would help.
Okay.
Just for any perception of
I'm
conflict.
going to excuse myself. Sit in the audience.
Thank you. I appreciate you deferring it to this meeting, and I have talked with Gretchen, and I've also talked with Doug about potential. It is typical for OAL to turn back legislation proposals all the time, and partially because of the requirement to show a need or to have a defensible reason for doing a change. LAAB does not have to have a defensible reason to make their changes. In fact, they're controlled under CHIA, the Council of Higher Education Association, and other federal requirements for accrediting a professional degree. And there are others a little more versed in all of that. I'm not versed there. It's a domino effect when you make one change in this law. Everything is intertwined. It's a beautiful lace, our Practice Act. And the concern that Eddie and I would like to say is that had we realized what a dilemma you were in, we would have been more than happy to sit down and offer options to simplify this, because we've gone through the review process with two educators on our review process is different, and former LATC members. But what we have found is that because the LATC chooses to give the same amount of credit for a master's or a accredited degree of bachelor's for our program with a bachelor's degree, it should be in the same sort of rigor, like academic rigor. So how do we maintain that without copying LAAB? Well, there were many things we had to change on the LAAB. We had to change. We were administrators. We're not. We don't have faculty. We don't have full-time faculty, so we changed it to instructors. The full-time equivalency. We made all of those changes in 2012, I believe. We made a lot of those changes. It could be even simpler. If we use the format or the process that LAAB does and put on the programs the requirement that they present what they are teaching in relationship to whatever the curriculum requirements are that are national standards, we can call it that without calling it out as LAAB. So that when the standard changes, some schools are reviewed of the past standard because they don't have time to implement the new ones, or they can choose to implement the new ones and be assessed on the new standards. We would put that requirement of presenting which standards are being used at the school and the logic for it on the schools for the presentation and our self-evaluation report. That takes the defensible element out. So you're not changing the law so much as setting up a process, which is an easier thing to get proved because it isn't dependent on something that changes according to the academic requirements. And that makes us, as the academic provider, meet those standards. To also stay in the marketplace. I mean, let's be honest. We're not going to be able to have people want to take our classes if it's not really consistent with some of the standards that are out there nationally. That comes to reciprocity. We have, reciprocity is a two-way street. Right now, we have lots of problem with California's many venues, and this is one of them. It's not accepted in every state, nor are those of us who were licensed under the PELA, of which I am a happy licensee under that. But I think CLARB is also dealing with some of these issues. So that, but the reason I bring this up is it's also such a fine lace that it's hard to change one thing without the other. The intent of this was, as Gretchen mentioned, is to set in place a process for approval, which can be much simpler than it is because we were really trying to mimic the LAAB complete package instead of just the process. Eddie and I are perfectly committed, as you saw in our letter, to work with the staff of the LATC to make this work and help and simplify it so that it is less and less of a question of defensible and easily defensible. So we propose that. I would like to ask if you have any questions of me, if I can clarify anything.
Okay. So it's 10:30.
Yeah. So you want to defer this to afterwards?
Yes, if that's okay.
Okay. No, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hold that thought.
Yes.
Thank you for getting.
Yeah. That was great.
Toastmasters.
See, I think we have some additional people that arrived for the forum. Do you want to introduce yourself? We were introducing everyone else a little earlier, so it's voluntary.
Sure. I'll introduce myself. I'm Jeff Janway. I'm a landscape architect in California and licensed since 1978 in California. I'm also on the UCLA faculty as an extension teacher part-time. I've also taught here at Cal Poly. I'm a landscape architect director, one of the directors of Architecture Design Group, about an 18-person firm in Rancho Cucamonga.
Sean Scuddy, recent graduate 2014 in UCLA Extension Program and recently licensed as a landscape architect in 2016.
Congratulations. Okay, so we have this public forum. It's regarding educational requirements for licensure and related areas of study, followed by discussion and possible action on strategic plan objectives to review Title 16 CCR Section 2620 Education and Training Credits to expand for educational experience to include degrees in related areas of study. Okay, so Gretchen.
I am going to be presenting this, but Brianna, we did do a PowerPoint presentation for our March 17th public forum, and we're going to give that here as well, and Brianna is going to facilitate that.
Is that okay? Can we start?
Sure.
All right. Forgive me, I'm going to have to stand up front because I don't have a working cookie thing, so please let me know if I'm blocking anyone's view. As Gretchen mentioned, we had a facilitated public forum back in March in Sacramento, so we wanted to mirror that here and give Southern California the opportunity to weigh in as well. This is the abridged version of the presentation provided by Solid, DCA Solid Learning Solutions. Basically, we wanted to just give you the need to know of this because for the sake of time, we want to hear the comments. So forgive me in advance, I'm going to be breezing through it. Let me know if you have any questions, but I just wanted to give a brief rundown of why this forum is being held. The purpose for the forum today is to discuss the options for expanding the degree requirements for licensure. The committee, of course, is seeking to hear public opinion. Like I said, we have opinion comments that were presented in Sacramento. Those comments are included in the meeting packets, and then they'll be hearing your comments here today. And simply what we're seeking to do is just gather your input, and that may cover, what you believe options are, or, what other states are doing, but just gathering opinions for the committee to weigh. I want to quickly remind you why the LATC exists. So with the mission, the LATC regulates the practice of landscape architecture through the enforcement of the Landscape Architects Practice Act to protect consumers and the public health, safety, and welfare while safeguarding the environment. So that's just a frame of reference, keeping in mind that is the mandate. That is, consumer protection is paramount. Some brief background information. 1997 was when things changed. After 1997, CCR Section 2620 allowed for up to 4 years of training credit for landscape contractor experience, and it requires all applicants to hold a degree-approved extension certificate, in landscape architecture or an accredited degree in architecture. Some more background information. Pre-1997, credit for any bachelor's or associate's degree toward the required 6 years of training experience was offered. The LATC allowed eligibility to applicants with 6 years training experience under a licensed landscape architect in lieu of education. And the LATC granted up to 1 year training credit for experience under a licensed architect, civil engineer, landscape contractor, or nursery person. This is our staff did a little bit of research on what's being accepted by other states. This is kind of just a snapshot of degrees accepted by other states. Those include landscape architecture, of course, architecture, civil engineering, horticulture, landscape architectural technology, and any design-related degree. To pin it down a little bit further, this might be a little bit difficult to read, but it is a 2-page matrix, and there is a slide after this, but this kind of delineates further what the other states are accepting. So there are many that accept accredited architecture degrees, of course many that accept accredited engineering degrees, any bachelor's degree, and then non-accredited landscape architectural degrees. And many states are covering that. Here is page 2 of that matrix. So you can see probably the majority is non-accredited landscape architectural degrees being accepted by other states. So as I mentioned, that was a quick rundown. Just let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, instructions for this forum. What we'd like you to do is please, when it's your turn to speak, come forward, offer your name and your organization or affiliations. If you're a California licensee, an out-of-state licensee, if you represent an association. So please introduce yourself accordingly, and then please succinctly provide us with your stance on expanding credit for education experience to include degrees in related areas of study. Following all of your comments, then as Gretchen mentioned, the committee will hold a discussion. Any questions?
Will the discussion be amongst us or just amongst the committee?
It'll be a discussion, yes. Right. Okay, then for the sake of our committee members' eyes, going to turn that off. Would you like your laptop back with you? Sure.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Brianna, can you just repeat what you said in terms of discussion? What's the dynamics of discussion? Is it going to be back and forth? Is it going to be as a whole?
My understanding is the committee will be hearing discussion, and then following the end of discussion, then Gretchen will present the issue and you all will hold it.
So in a way, this is almost like 2 separate agenda items. This is much like the first public forum that was held, where the committee wasn't even there. You're just taking comments, you're taking public input in the forum. And then the second part is, okay, as part of the LATC meeting, you're discussing, you're asking for public comment anytime you vote on anything, and you go from there.
Okay. So let's open it up for discussion. Would someone like to go first?
I'm happy to start. So I'm not quite sure how to do this because I'd really like to discuss with all
Oh,
of
we'd
you.
love to for you to give me the faces to go to that.
Okay, let me see what I can do. My name is Dustin Maxim. I'm a registered landscape architect in the state of Nevada. I have 14 years experience in the industry. 4 of those are in civil engineering, 10 are in landscape architecture. I'm here representing a group of my colleagues who are also licensed out of state and unable to gain reciprocity or initial licensure in California. I want to thank you for having this forum. This is really important, and it's so great to have this opportunity for a discussion with all of you. Unfortunately, I think I'm the only opposition person, so fire away and maybe I can respond, is how I hope this could go. I would just say that currently in California, landscape architecture licensure is exclusionary. It imposes significant barriers to entry. It discourages diversity, as evidenced by this route, and limits fair competition. Our licensure system needs to be brought in line with California's architects and civil engineers, as well as the majority of other states and Florida. Doing so will benefit the public and consumers. I believe that there is a shortage of skilled landscape architects today. This is per many sources, including the last LATC Sunset Report. California's education requirement essentially cuts off full swaths of potential candidates from ever gaining licensure. Our profession needs to include individuals with varied backgrounds to stimulate innovation and spread awareness of our profession to other disciplines. In many of the educational institutions that we're going to discuss and you are representing, it's common for instructors of different subjects to teach a class in landscape architecture because that's their specialty and they're bringing their point of view to those students. I believe in our profession, it should be the same way. My background, I have a bachelor's degree in geography from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and my education is in spatial analysis. And I look at things completely different from landscape architects, but there's so much overlap that there's no communication problem. I find that I bring critical skills that are needed to the profession, and I think that we should look at including those. I would just say that it's sort of the urban forestry analogy. We don't want to plant a city with all the same type of tree. Well, we don't want to license your population with all the same type of landscape architect. Diversity can only benefit us all. And today what we are really looking at is minimum competency. Basically, what accredited 4-year bachelor's degrees could be equivalent to an associate's degree in landscape architecture in its current format. So currently, what I consider the minimum standard pathway is an associate's degree in landscape architecture. That's equivalent to 1 year of the 6 required. Then 4 years experience as a landscape contractor, and 1 year of experience under a landscape architect. That's the absolute minimum today to get licensed in the state. So I believe that's what we're comparing. And I think that a related bachelor's degree being counted equivalent to an associate's degree, which is 1 year of the 6, is more conservative than this as far as education. So all I think you should consider is that a bachelor's degree in a related subject is equivalent to an associate's degree, and that person with a related bachelor's degree would still need 5 years of experience to make up the remainder. I don't think that's a lot to ask. Especially when you look at, there's only 5 community college associate's degrees programs in California. And when you look at those 5 and you look at the classes they teach, really there's only 9 classes that are related to landscape architecture. And of those, 2 of them are plant identification. And really only 1 is on grading, drainage, site design. Most of them are graphics and plant identification. Those are skills that you can learn on the job over 6 years or 5 years. And just to sort of drive this home, according to the 2016 roster, there are only 3,600 licensed landscape architects in California. I don't know why. I don't know why, compared to California architects, 16,000, why are our graduates not getting licensed? Of those 3,600, 86%, 3,100 reside in the state. Of those, half were issued before 1997 under the previous board. That means that currently half of our licensure population was licensed under a system that allowed related degrees. And that's evidence that related degrees are not a threat to the profession, because we have licensed landscape architects today practicing using their education that was gained from a related degree. So to me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, we've got people out there, there's no issue. I don't think there's been an unusual amount of complaints against people of different backgrounds or investigations done. So I think it's something that we should really consider. I don't expect this to move quickly. I don't expect a decision to be made today. And I think we should just discuss it and keep analyzing what this means to the profession. When we look at the majority of other states, they all have pathways for any bachelor's degree, or even experience only in many, many cases. Clark has a pathway, which is any bachelor's degree plus 6 years experience, and 2 of those 6 can be under an architect or engineer. So I believe that's a great model to look at as well. And a lot of the arguments I've heard in the past are, well, we're not talking a lot about big numbers here. So why should we worry about this? And when you look at the licensees every year, they're far less than 100. I think it was 76 maybe last year, maybe 80 the year before that. And I believe the number of reciprocity applications rejected are around 5 a year. So, we're talking about maybe letting 10 people in a year, 20 people. It's not a threat to the profession. It's not going to devalue your degrees. You're still going to be the standard that everybody looks to. Your education is going to make you more valuable. The public are going to recognize graduates of this school and many others as sort of the representation of the profession. But our profession requires people of all different skill sets, and we need to include all types of people. Some people in this profession are technical. They're really good at irrigation, or there's a multitude of other things, great. And some people are more on the artistic end. So why not bring everybody together? And the more we grow our profession, the more important it becomes, and the more people know about it. So thank you for listening, and I hope to discuss with you.
Next. So my name is Kelly Shannon. I'm the director of the graduate program of landscape architecture and urbanism at the University of Southern California. And I would like to first maybe give some context to our program and to my position in that program, and then respond to the comment also we just heard. So the program at USC is an accredited first professional degree program. It's been accredited, it's had a long history of landscape studies that's been there for quite some decades, in fact. But in fact, it's only been an accredited program since 2011. And it is an LLAB accredited program. There's been a series of other programs that have been there I could even say a bit informally, there's been a kind of post-professional program that was a 1.5-year program, and then there has also been a 2-year program, and those have in fact, since I became director in January 2015, we've stopped both of those programs. They were not actually officially approved LLAB programs. We now only have the 3-year graduate program where we allow advanced placement into that program for students who do have an LLAB bachelor degree. So they can come in to complete 2 years. So we only are accepting the LLAB standard because we recognize that in the United States, it's very important to understand, and this is where I have to say for myself, having returned to the United States, living 25 years in Europe, that the separation of disciplines, the accreditation of the disciplines is very important. I am a licensed architect. Actually, I'm a registered architect, but I'm not practicing, so I'm no longer paying my dues to the AIA. I took my exams in the late 80s in New York State, but I am not recognized in this country as a landscape architect. I'm recognized in Europe and in Asia as being a landscape architect for the work I've done. But in the United States, I'm not a landscape architect. I understand, as you just said, Dustin, that our field requires the skills of many professionals. It's enriched by all of those professionals. And that's how we gain, perhaps one of the most interdisciplinary fields, our strength by working collaboratively, understanding that we don't have all of those skills ourselves. We need to educate our students and we need to work as a group. At USC, our teachers are not all landscape architects in our program. One of our tenured faculty is in fact comes as a geographer from UCLA. Is also 50% employed by our Institute of Spatial Sciences, 50% in the School of Architecture, in the program of landscape architecture and urbanism. So I think many of the points that you made are really well taken, are incredibly important, that we need to educate the next generation of landscape architects across disciplines. But for us, and I think for the state of California, as has been said in many of the letters, I think coming from students of the program at UCLA, California needs to remain a leader as they are in the environment, as they have been in landscape architecture, not necessarily follow other states and know what they are doing, but to remain a leader in the field, a leader in the profession of landscape architecture that is being undermined by architects, like myself, by engineers that are trying to grab our work, trying to grab the work of landscape architects, trying to fight for work that's already shrinking. So I think it's really important that as the educational field is trying to strongly guard a profession and fight for the profession. Particularly, I think also architects have to do this from engineers. I think they're the ones who have the biggest market share of what gets done in the built environment. We should actually come together with architects and urban designers to take back much more from engineers. I think they're our biggest I would say public enemy, if I dare use the word. Even though we have to work with them and understand their expertise in terms of our profession, the profession of architecture, the profession of landscape architecture, and I would say urban design and urbanism. But I really believe, because the culture of the United States, which I understand is very different than the culture of Europe, the culture of Asia, where I've been embedded in my professional life, my academic life for a long time, where there is a blurring of the professions. That's not the case here. In the United States, there is a very strong definition of the field. There's a very strong legal definition of who can call themselves an architect, who can call themselves a landscape architect. And I think we have to recognize that. And I think we need to keep a strong boundary of licensure, who's allowed into the field, and how we educate our students. You're correct, I think, about the noticing the shrinking numbers, but that also has a lot to do with the shrinking numbers of students coming into the field in general. That's a known trend. So of course there's going to be fewer people going to get their license because there's fewer students coming. There are fewer domestic students. Most of our schools are now filled with international students. So this is a bigger problem the United States is facing. Fewer students are going for education. A lot of it has to do with the prohibitive costs of education. So there are bigger problems that are beyond what we can deal with in this room. It needs to be dealt with by people like Betsy DeVos, if she can deal with such issues. But I think there are much larger questions that trickle down to our fields, the fields of the built environment, the field of landscape architecture. But we are very strongly in favor of trying to keep professional, not opening it up to other degrees, because we think that we need to. It would open up these so-called barriers. We think are not actually barriers to licensing per se, but they're strong protections for the field, for our education, and for landscape architecture that we need to work together to protect. Thank you.
I'd like to ask you a question if I can. So that's okay. So we're trying to keep these barriers in place. We've got 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. We've got demographic trends where people are not going into the profession. And we have limited schools that offer these programs. So how can we possibly keep the licensure population the same or increasing with all of those trends happening at the same time without encompassing other disciplines?
I think there's a lot of issues all at play. Different. I don't think there's an easy answer to that.
Yeah.
It's something that we have to work together to increase the desirability of becoming a landscape architect. Is first and foremost understanding what is our field about, which there's a huge problem with perception. So I think it's a very complex question. For me, it's not an easy thing to answer. I don't think there is a simple answer. And I think that's what we can all do in many.
My concern is that if we keep these barriers in place, that our profession.
Can I make a suggestion? I think it's great that we're discussing, but what I'd like to do is give everyone an opportunity to speak, and then we can go ahead.
Usually when I address, I'm usually addressing the committee, I'm not addressing the audience, so forgive me. My name is Jim Cackel. I'm the president of the California Council of the American Society of Landscape Architects. I'm a licensed landscape architect in the state of California and Texas. I am one of the retired baby boomers that you just spoke of. The CCASLA, we sent a letter. I'm sure you've received it, and I'm not going to have you listen to me as I read this whole letter. I don't think I need to do that. But basically, what the CCASLA recommends is that this committee convene the educational subcommittee, and with a panel of experts making recommendations based upon comparison of the rationale and commonality of subject matter used by various states to determine if it meets the standards set by the LAAB. The committee, LATC, could also consider paneling technical experts to review the qualifications of candidates that do not meet the exact criteria as stated in the Practice Act through the appeals process. Simply put, I don't, as representing the CCASLA, I don't believe, I believe that I can state that we are not for modifying the Practice Act itself and modifying, excuse me, not the Practice Act, the educational requirements. And I have to take exception. I don't like using the word barriers. And the reason I say that is because I also teach at UCLA. And I've taught there for almost 15 years, I don't know, 15 years. And one of the things, Sean was a student of mine, and one of the things that I find, and this is more of a personal comment, one of the things I find at UCLA is there's a lot of people that come through that program, all different backgrounds. The last 2 classes I've had an attorney, civil engineers. I had a student 2 years ago that now has just done his capstone project that was the director of community planning for the city, for a city in San Fernando Valley. Now, if anyone would have been able to protest that there is a barrier of him sitting down to get a license, to sit for a license, it would have been someone like him, 25 years of experience as an urban planner, actually a director of an agency. But he didn't. He didn't see it as a barrier. He saw it as an opportunity. He came to UCLA to get a certificate. There are many, many skill sets that people bring with them when they come to UCLA. I had a student who was a bank manager. He said, well, you know, I'm here, but I was a bank manager. I got a degree in business. Well, management comes across all lines. It doesn't matter whether you're managing a bank or managing people or managing a design studio. Management skills are management skills. But they saw those individuals in all the classes that I've had the honor to be in front of. All of these people came from all types of different backgrounds, but they didn't see this as a barrier. They saw it as an opportunity. And my business partner of 27 years, Steve Lang, is here, and I'm sure he will confirm the fact that landscape architecture has changed over the years. And probably in the last 20 or 25 years, landscape architects are now prime consultants, lead consultants, LEAD consultants. 25 or 30 years ago, we didn't see that. We followed the civil engineer, we were brought on as a sub-consultant by the architect. But now agencies are bringing landscape architects into the world of lead consulting, prime consulting, and there's a reason for that. And the reason doesn't have very much to do with trying to expand the educational requirements. I think the educational requirements as they are right now are fine, and I do not see them, and I don't believe the CCASLA, those that I represent, see them as barriers. We see them as opportunities for someone who wants to become a landscape architect to go through the process. No different than I would if I wanted to become a medical doctor, a veterinarian, or a physicist. It doesn't matter. And so, looking as a glass half full kind of person in this regard, I don't see it as barrier. I see it as opportunity. And those who want to take that opportunity will do it. And UCLA, under the leadership of Stephanie and her staff, are a testament, as in Cal Poly and San Luis Obispo and Cal Berkeley and Pomona, all are doing a great job. So, thank you for your time.
I'm going to back up and be over here, because I also have a spatial problem with not addressing everyone at once. And
Welcome to move the chair back.
No, I don't need the chair. I'm going to stand up. I think that's my name is Esther Margulies. I'm the Assistant Director of the USC MLA plus U Master of Landscape Architecture and Urbanism Program, working with Kelly Shannon. Kelly gave the lecture. I'm now going to, I want to speak a little bit as someone with a foot in both worlds, but my 30 years of licensed practice, I think, gives me a perspective of what candidates who achieve licensure need to be able to do when they enter into practice, and whether, and taking a look in terms of perspective of whether my fellow practitioners are really upholding the mandate of the Practice Act. And I just start with thank you for the opportunity to come here and speak today. That's always the polite thing to do. And thank you also in your PowerPoint presentation for reminding us what the mission of the LATC is, which is to ensure the competency of this profession and to create and uphold our practice standards. And those are the things that I think we really need to think about that maintain the value of our profession and practitioners in it. So I come to you as someone with a foot in academia, along a bigger foot in practice, and especially experience in a multidisciplinary firm as a principal at AECOM, practicing shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow with my related practitioners in architecture, urban design, engineering, economics, geography, all of those fields that all have somewhat specialized educational requirements. We're special because we're licensed, because we have a responsibility to uphold the safety, the health, and the welfare of the public, which is different from some of those other related professions, and we can't forget that, and that really is what LATC and licensure is about. I think what Jim just said about taking things back to an education committee is very valuable, and I come with 3 questions that may be good for a committee to continue to review. One is, what is the data on competence, risk, and liability in other states based on the acceptance of related field education? Is there data that would tell us whether practitioners with licenses in other states who came with related field education and a combination of related field and practical experience are doing a better or worse job of upholding public health, safety, and welfare? The second is there any recent data on the pass-fail rates for the exam in California based on related education or lower educational standards? What do we see in terms of candidates coming with the combination of various kinds of degrees of practical experience? And I'm sure this is something, as a newcomer, this is my first time testifying before this commission. Perhaps you've already covered this, but this is an opportunity just to ask that question and always to review that data, so we're looking at recent data. And then really, I think that's a question about those rates in other states and the related education. As a professional, my concern is that as we start looking at more narrower educational backgrounds, this will most likely lead to a specialization in the field. Landscape architects will become people with various specialties and lose their general competence. The competence that is required through an LAAB accredited program includes all the things that uphold public health, safety, and welfare. The site engineering, like grading and stormwater management, structural integrity of projects, construction technology, knowledge of codes and regulations, our commitment and our requirement to be stewards of the natural environment, including preservation of wetlands and other protected habitats. Certainly plant materials, but not just plant ID, but being able to recognize when specifying plants could create a hazard. And those are life safety issues. And then the last one is professional ethics, where we make a commitment and we learn in our education about ethics and the protection of the client and how to avoid conflicts of interest. So these are all things that we are required in our accredited programs to provide, and I don't think you can point to any of the related fields and find all of those things in one area. And even in practice, for a year or a few years, that's hard to find unless you're working for a very well-rounded, very diverse practice. I think that if we reduce the educational standards, certainly we will reduce the competency. I also think that our profession will become less valuable and ultimately irrelevant. Because if we're only providing a small fraction of this, what we require now, people will go other places, and there will be so little to hang your hat on why you need to hire a landscape architect. We'll find ourselves with less and less to do and less respect in the general world. And I'll just say something that may be perhaps unpopular, again related to the potential of further study and education. Perhaps
where we are now, since the update in 1997, perhaps we've actually already diluted the educational requirements. And perhaps we really should be looking again at, because of the changing nature of the profession's responsibilities and how we've become, how we're more and more in leadership roles for very substantial, large projects, maybe we should be tightening up the educational requirements and making sure that every program meets the LAAP standards or their equivalent, because that's the only way to ensure the competency over the wide range of responsibilities we have in this field. Thank you.
Welcome to move to chair, whatever you want to move it to.
Thank you. This does feel a little strange being different directions. It's like getting around, right? Right, well, thank you for taking my comments. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll try to speak up. It's a very lively room. Thank you for taking my comments, and I submitted a letter to the LATC, and I know it's in the packet for you today. I won't completely reiterate those comments, but I did want to bring up a few points that I brought up in the last public hearing, in the public workshop, public forum, and things that I've heard now over time, and just kind of want to reiterate and make sure that the LATC really understands what is at stake here. I really want to address this issue first by saying that what problem are we trying to solve? If we have one or two people that come through and try to get reciprocity through another state, there is an avenue for them to do that. We don't need to open up a complete regulation and do a full audit of that regulation for the few people that I see happening through this. The second thing is that the Education Subcommittee worked very hard on this for, I believe, 5 years. I think we had a total of like 12 or 13 recommendations to the committee to adopt, and I don't see that all of them have actually taken place. One of which was just to incorporate data over time of people who were being licensed through the process and what their pass rates were, what schools they were coming from, and things like that. That data is missing, and I don't see that as part of this. We've gone outside the state to look at other states, and CLARB has data on those other states, and they don't but we don't have data within our own state. So with the absence of data, and I'll say, I said this eons ago with the Education Subcommittee, with the absence of data, how can we make a determination, on this? I don't think that we've really done our homework. We were supposed to be doing this over all this time period, now collecting data, and the data that doesn't show it now because there hasn't been any data collected. So I think that's a big issue, and that data is really what you have to use to earmark the program for future understanding. You run the risk of unintended consequences if you change the law before data is actually gathered. Gather the data first. That's one thing that I can say, as part of CLARB's understanding of things, is that we do a lot of data collection and don't make any determinations before data has been collected. I think also there is a disparity too when you start thinking about trying to make comparisons between different states. Different states have different requirements, as well as CAB has different requirements. CAB's requirements are the way that they are because of the structured internship program. The structured internship program does not exist within CLARB, and I'm not sure that will actually happen anytime soon because of the small numbers of students coming through the programs this way. It is very difficult to put together a structured internship program, and that in and of itself creates unnecessary friction for
for candidates. When they have to go, one of the reasons that NCAR put together a structured internship program is because they saw this trend of architects not being licensed for 12, 13 years, going through tirelessly, doing all this education and everything else. So that was creating a barrier in and of itself, just because of the length of time to get to licensure. Putting up another structured internship program isn't necessarily going to ease that situation for landscape architects. That could just create more friction in the system. And I think what we want to do is create less friction. And one of the things that we looked at with the education subcommittee some time back is that by creating a means for people to get at least the 1 year of education, going to an associate's program, and not putting any real stipulation on that, if they come through, say, a geology program from Nevada, and maybe they have a bachelor's degree in geology or geography, and they want to become licensed in California, all they need to do is do 1 year at an associate program, and the experience requirement, and they are able to meet our requirements to sit for the exam. I think we did ourselves a great opening up of our requirements to sit for the exam through the education subcommittee back when we did that, because it allows for less friction in the system and the ability for people to find different paths to education and experience to create that three-legged stool that we always talk about. The last thing that I want to say is that one of the things that came up in the education forum back in Sacramento is the fact that all of this is interconnected. There's a reason why the education subcommittee took 5 years to do this, and that is because you can't touch one thing without affecting reciprocity. You can't touch education without affecting reciprocity, without affecting experience, without affecting the exam credits, those sorts of things. So it is a much greater thing to deal with than just looking at one siloed portion of it. It has to be looked at as an interconnected network. Lastly, I want to just say that I think you all got the draft model law. I just want to make sure that the LATC understands that they need to take some time with this. The education subcommittee, like I said, met for 5 years on this. That is that is a substantial amount of time. And I'm not saying that that we all couldn't do something much quicker by doing some other format of this. And there probably is more data and statistics out there now than there ever has been. So it probably could go a little quicker. But I do think you owe it to yourselves, the LATC owes it to landscape architects and future landscape architects to really take your time to make sure that you digest this information properly. Make sure that you understand all the ramifications, those unintended consequences that might come out of all of this before making a decision on this. And that includes all the CLARD data that is out there as well.
Can I ask you a couple questions? Number one, we've been told by CLARD that the data in the pass rate field per college, per state, per degree is not available. So that is one thing that we did look for. The other thing was, you had mentioned before that we should wait for the CLARD model law to come out. When I read it, I see that the CLARD model law is suggesting that you have an approved degree you have to approve a degree, but it doesn't say what an approved degree is, it doesn't specify what the degree is, and it says you have approved experience, but it doesn't go into detail as to what that is. So I'm not sure how the CLARD model law is going to benefit states that have different ideas about what degrees should be accepted and what should not.
Right. I think this is a starting point, to be honest with you, with the model law. The starting point being that they wanted there is a definite need for different states to have an understanding of the ramifications of states that they have other licenses within. there are a lot of disparities between states, but really this comes down to individual. We talk all the time about the UCLA extension, for instance, the extension certificate programs are not granted reciprocity in other states. And so we, here in California, we've taken great pains to create more avenues for people to gain licensure through the extension programs, through associate programs, through other opportunities, but other states don't allow that in their states. So I think that the understanding from Clark is that there needs to be more comedy between states, and that there maybe needs to be compacts created within states, but that's really not Clark's role. That's going to have to be something that the states kind of come together and do that. So I think this is a first step towards doing that, because that is something that I think that we've all recognized. Most of the executives, the board executives have kind of understood that there needs to be more direct understanding of the reciprocity between states.
I'm curious about that because so many states, and I think there's 26 or 28, allow you to get licensed with experience only. So why they wouldn't accept, for reciprocity purposes, an extension certificate, I don't understand that.
Yeah, I can't really answer that question either. I think that a lot of it is, could be a little bit of shopkeeping in their own. But you have to understand that different states have different demographics as well. Here we have 1,600 or 3,600 licensees here in California, whereas Wyoming maybe has 200. So 50, yeah.
If I could just, you can wrap it up so that.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. We'll get back.
Can I just make one quick comment? Tell Christine, I think you might have misstated something. In the Landscape Architecture Practice Act, an associate degree in landscape architecture from a community college, which consists of at least a 2-year curriculum, gets a 1-year credit. It's not, you can't go 1 year at community college.
That's what I meant.
Yeah,
1 year of credit. Yes,
right, get 1 year credit to get the actual associate degree.
Thank you, I was going to bring that up also. And I have a good time addressing
In the round.
in the round. Thank you again, Stephanie Landrigan. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm with UCLA Extension. I'm a licensed landscape architect. And I want to focus a little more on the defensibility of making changes. We just recently talked a little bit about OAO kicking back the law that we had already proposed to change the approval process because of the defensibility of the intent to change it. If we make changes to the education, we need to have it be defensible, and we have to have it based on whether it meets the health, safety, and welfare criteria, either furthering protection or the fact that we aren't meeting the protection requirement by the existing extension, existing education. So I think that's a high bar for us to consider in opening up education again. The gentleman here who has spoken, he said, well, there's maybe 10 people who would have it. It's not a discretionary review. We are talking about state law, which is based upon how it affects the whole state and all of the consumers in the state. We're under the Department of Consumer Affairs. So in reviewing the education requirement, is the education requirement deficit? Is a question we should ask. Are we not being able to protect health, safety, and welfare with what is going on here? Have we found, I do believe the original question that came forward to start this discussion was when I was on the board, it has carried over, and it's a valid discussion to have. The other question that is married to it, maybe an unhappy marriage, is the reciprocity. And at that time, we discussed expanding reciprocity. We believe that there was no appeal process or petition process at all in our law for any differences from people who wanted to have reciprocity. And that discussion happened at your last meeting, and I think that it's very important that it has been addressed by the committee. But let's talk about education again. Reciprocity means there's a two-way thing. You give me something, I get something in return, and you understand what the value of it is. But reciprocity is dealt not just on the individual, but on what another state has done. By bartering education without understanding how it's going to affect reciprocity, and I am a victim of the state board not thinking about this when they instituted the Pella, because although I'm licensed here, I am not able to get reciprocity, even through a petition process, young man, in another state, in very many other states. And it is, if I come and beseech you to go to other states and to Clark and fight for me, is that the right use of a state board for an individual? Or for the 1,500 people who got licensed under that? I don't think so. I think it's a state law. You have to consider the broader implication and not the individual subjugated idea. So we need to really think about this in terms of its defensibility. I think the petition process, if it is significant enough, and I mentioned in my letter, and I sent you an amended letter based upon the 2010 subcommittee summary, which I thought was important to bring up, because the data has not been collected. We've made several changes that we thought were more access to becoming a landscape architect. Yet we don't know if people have used this access, whether it's been successful, how they have passed. And there's, of course, the balance here. If our passage rates go down because the quality of our candidates taking the test are insufficient to pass the test, it bears poorly on California, because it seems as though, because we have a much wider open forum to take the test, that if we have a higher fail rate, it affects all our education facilities too. It's assumed that we are educating people well. Our educators are not teaching what they should for the licensure. So there are individuals who are extraordinary and who have cobbled together and really want to be landscape architects. And bravo for them. And I think we welcome them in our profession. And many of them come to my program. We are your, let me tell you, I don't know, what shall we say? Your second chance. And we have screenwriters. We had a screenwriter from Dexter. We've had screenwriters from All in the Family. We've had lawyers. We've had dental technicians who are tired of being in people's mouths. There are a lot of people that have reformed their lives coming to a program that's in the evening, and that is an access that no other state provides. I think we've done a terrific job of providing access, but we keep data for you. We let you know what the success rate is. And I think that from the 2010 subcommittee on education, that data hasn't been gathered to even make this a defensible suggestion to open it up. And if you would like to open it up, if you think it's valid and you think that the education is not serving the public health, safety, and welfare, then I think it needs to be done by a subcommittee of educators and some practitioners and experts. I have people who come, as you heard, one of the planning directors wanted to become a landscape architect. I did transfer in certain common credits. Up to a third of our certificate can be transferred in. But there were maybe only 25% of what we had common to that. So there is that commonality that we all acknowledged. However, there was not a sufficient breadth within any of the individuals who have come to me to transfer in or to assume that they are what I would consider well-educated and person that I would send out to sit for the licensure. I highly recommend that you do consider a subcommittee if you want to consider this further, but I also ask you to ask yourself, is there a significant health, safety, and welfare issue that warrants us to even change it at this time? And I thank you so much for allowing me to talk to this. Thank you all.
First name? My name is John Pride. I'm a licensed landscape architect in the state of Washington. I'm a whole person from here in the Pasadena, Lockett County area. I've been here since 1980. I was a licensed landscape contractor for 25 years. Went to design examinations in 2000. I decided that it was some years by trying to take the exam. I had to go through Washington because I'm Stephanie. So had experience on.
Sir, would you increase some volume of your voice, please?
So I am that one example. I also would like to get reciprocity. I think the idea that education loses in this process, for those of us that didn't follow that program, I think is a mistake. I don't devalue the education process because of what I do. I put my work up against anybody in the industry. There are certain things that I don't do. I don't do because I'm sorry. I don't. There are certain things I don't do because I haven't been trained in it. But the overwhelming work of what I do is I'll put it up against anybody. My point is that going back to what Dustin's been working on all this time is that, and there's been a lot of conversation about the health, safety, and welfare of the public. One, even if you didn't go through the education process, there is a massive learning curve, even if you hadn't had it as my 25 years as a contractor, that the layer covers that in massive depth. But inevitably, you learn most of it on a day-to-day basis in the field. This isn't, you get basics in college, but everything that we know today is mostly developed in the field. And so with my 30 some odd years in design and construction, I'm one of the best around. So I don't think that it takes away from what you're trying to achieve. And it's not to take anything away from the education of those that go through that path. My path was different. I was able to pass the exam. It took me 4.5 years because I worked 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. So I don't have a lot of time to study. And plus I was 25 years out of school. But my point is, I think you should consider outside related degrees, especially if they've been able to pass the exam. I don't know what it's like now since they went to a computer, but I know when we took it and it was hand-drawn vignettes and the computer testing, that was not one easy exam. So I think that that's as much benefit there is in getting an education to start. How many of those people are still failing on a regular basis that come out of those programs? So all I'm saying is that if somebody can pass the exam, they should be considered. And I think that that's the criteria. And I understand the need and the want to try and hold on to this educational setup. But if somebody has other background, I mean, there is no mechanism. Stephanie and I talked about this a long time ago. There really is no mechanism to go to those handful of 10, 12, 15 people like myself, whose background is not in the same, but my background will stand on its own. But that should be considered if that's a separate avenue that you add to the table where there is as you said, a subcommittee that deals with individuals like myself who are more than competent to do what we do and pass the test. I think it's fair that you give that opportunity.
Chairman, ask a question. How did your years of experience out in the building projects, how did that inform you in terms of taking the exam? Was there a direct relationship that you felt?
Yeah, there was. Law was the I think A was mostly law. I passed that at first go. The only one that gave me trouble was B, and actually on the second time around, this is how sad the exam is. There were 5 criteria within the exam, or 4, excuse me. And 1 is you passed, 2 you just barely missed, and 3 is said too bad. Second time I took it, I had 3 1s and a 2, and I still didn't pass.
So what was B?
B is programming, inventory, that type of thing. So it wasn't that I didn't know it, it's just that in the end, the exams were such that, and again, I'm going back, I had, I bought every textbook that, was offered. So here I'm, 50 years old reading, reading textbooks. So, but the point is, the transfer was that I was already in the design mode of learning and teaching, or learning design from both architects and other landscape architects. Obviously, I followed some of the more preeminent ones, Erickson, Peters, and Tom, that did a lot of their work. So it was a fair amount of self-taught, but that's what makes me a little more unusual than some of the others. But that's...
Thank you.
Yeah.
If someone else speak, I'd love a chance to rebut and see the comments.
I'd like to hear some more people.
Yeah. Is there anyone else that wants to speak?
So, if I understand correctly, then we discussed it. Is there an opportunity to give the public more opportunity to talk?
So there's both. I mean, I have 11:30, but you don't necessarily want to or have to cut it off immediately. If you want public input, you can take that now. You also have the opportunity when you're voting to ask for public comment.
Okay, well, I think that the public would like to interact a little bit more, so I'd be curious to listen how people feel about that. Okay. I'm sorry, did you want to speak?
No, I just want to ask if you have time for questions. Are we gonna still have time to ask questions?
Yeah, okay, yeah, why don't you,
I would just like to say something.
Sure.
My name is Pamela Free. I'm a licensed landscape architect in the state of California. I received my education in Ohio at the Ohio State University. And I am president-elect of the Southern California chapter of Landscape Architects. And I would like to just put my voice in and thank you for allowing me to speak on a couple of notes that have already been brought up. First is that I feel that the licensure process and the licensure process of other allied professions really does give us that collaborative effort. And it's something that I think is very valuable to the state of California and to those clients that we represent. And civil engineers have their degrees in licensure for a reason. We don't step into their world because we have certain things that we are allowed to do within that realm and certain things that we rely on them to do. And I respect that. As I said, I received my education in Ohio. We had 1 week of irrigation training prior to graduation. And my plant knowledge and experience was minimal at best to deal with the variety and nature of our climate here in California. Because of that, I sought education to better myself so that I could sit for the exam. And the same goes for the path that I took in regards to irrigation training. I choose to, as was discussed, kind of focus on that more technical aspect. So I would disagree with the fact that was brought up earlier that our world here and that our practice of licensed practitioners tends to deal with more design and planting. I don't think that's true. I pride myself on my technical experience. And I'm often asked to collaborate with fellow landscape architects because of that. And I know there is a lot of us that do that. So I think that's something that you should hear. And I think the path that we have, we've talked about that path to education in our state, Stephanie's program. I think it gives a pathway, and I think it is something that should be considered. I think we do a great job in the state of allowing people with other degrees to take that path, and we welcome them. But I think there are certain educational aspects as stewards of the land and as knowledgeable people about the environment and all of that that should be learned. And I think, yes, there's certainly aspects that you get as you're practicing in this one, but I do think it comes down to education and a certain commitment that we take very seriously here in the state. So thank you very much for your time.
Tracy Morgan Hollingworth with the California Council of ASLA. We had a letter that we sent for the first meeting in March, and then this meeting. I think the emphasis that Christine made is striking for me because I've been working with ASLA since 2004, and Brianna's the 5th or 6th program manager that has been staffing LATC. And so I think really, and I heard Trish Rodriguez had pulled together a lot of the history that will help you, Brianna, but I think that is the key. You know, you have data. I have not heard anybody bring up the data of, people who have been trying to get reciprocity or who are trying to sit for a layer. I think that is so important. And so if that can be something that our practitioners can come and help the education subcommittee, I think that would be a real key, thing to help, Brianna be able to kind of get up to speed as to where you all have been all these years, and will help me too, because I've been trying to get my arms around this profession for several years. And you're right, we have a PR issue with trying to tell the public, your elevator speech. Who are you? What do you do? You do a lot of things. And I think, I was a geography major at one point, then I went to political science, but bottom line is it's hard for people to swing open the doors when so many people have kind of gone through the process. So please, use that data. The other thing our letter addressed, which Stephanie started to comment on, is that same education subcommittee can make recommendations regarding the extension programs. I think that's so important. I was in Sacramento working in the state legislature when the Office of Administrative Law was actually created in Sacramento. And the genesis of it was that people didn't understand where these laws came from. They didn't understand what was the need for the laws. There were a lot of laws that should have been knocked off the books a long time ago. And so in the effort of trying to streamline government, Little Hoover does their thing, and Office of Administrative Law does their thing in trying to make it clear as to why these laws are needed. And if they aren't, as Gretchen pointed out, or if they don't meet those particular standards, then they do regularly kick those things back to whatever agency is trying to bring forward their recommendations. And it's just diligence on that agency's part in trying to make that case. And the third part of our letter was also commenting that CLARB, is trying to put that model together. Gretchen also commented that, some of the things are very generic in it because not every state kind of comports, to the same standards. But I think it's good if you have a national standard to at least look at that. And I think you all were possibly waiting. I called CLARB when we had a break to see whether we could get an answer for you. And hopefully, if we do get an answer, I'll just shoot an email to you all. But thank you for listening to us. I think our members have, they're all over the field, habitat restoration projects. I know, Patricia, you worked a lot on big projects. And we learned in a survey several years ago that our members are becoming prime contractors for a lot of these different projects. So we're not necessarily the subs all the time. And I think people, now that I think Patricia, you've done a great job of collaborating with all the different professions out there, the more we collaborate with them, the more we learn. about what they do, the more they learn about what's wrong. So thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Steve Lang. I've actually been on the board and I was on the education committee when we first went over this a number of years ago. And we did spend years going through this, as Christine said, and spent a lot of time very concerned about the educational component. And in fact, I actually teach at UCLA as well for 19 years, and we consolidated our program slightly. And just the thought of trying to capture everything the landscape architect is to know in 1 or 2 years is unbelievable. Truly to think that we diminish it to not have any educational requirement would be a real concern to me, because there's such specialty that we're into now, especially with the drought situation, with us doing more green infrastructure. We're really getting involved in more and more issues that are really public health and safety oriented. So I think that should be, again, the yardstick or the measuring litmus test for maintaining that safety and protection of the public. That's what our role is. That's what the setup for the requirements were for sitting for the exam. And I think that education requirements are really very important. I think that knowing the extra work we went through on the subcommittee with Dick Zweifel from Cal Poly, we had really mixed Christine, of course. A lot of people were involved in that. And it took a lot of time to go through the process of considering what would be the ramifications. So I think really a subcommittee is important to do this if you're going to really get into it. Look at any kind of data we were able to get in the years since that was done. And that will help us to, or help you to better evaluate really this educational component. So thank you very much for considering it.
Hey, my name is Jennifer Labarx. I'm a student at UCLA Extension in the Landscape Architecture program. I was also recently a student down at San Diego Mesa College in their AA program for landscape architecture, which was sadly recently closed, I think due to enrollment issues. I see the biggest barrier as a student to becoming a professional and developing the competency that's required to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public is education at the community college level. I think if more people were aware of the design professions coming out of high school and had access to that easily in terms of transferring into programs in community colleges, that we would see stronger interest earlier in the career cycle, and we would probably have more interest in the profession in general. I think maintaining the expectations for competency that we have in the state of California and the educational requirement that we do have, whether it be at the community college level or the extension level or the college or master's level, is really important to defining a role in the profession and being able to work with respectability with allied fields. I think that if we do not have a strong role definition, we will not be able to give our experience and be able to help protect the public's health, safety, and welfare for everything that's built outside of the box. So I'd like for everyone to imagine just a situation in which nobody's really thinking about the public's health, safety, or welfare outside of the building. And I think at an educational level that we have required by the LATC, and in order to pass the exams, I think it's important that we maintain those standards in order to be able to be a central part of projects. Thank you.
Okay, your last opportunity to come forward.
So, you know, I respect everything you said. It makes a lot of sense to me. The problem is what doesn't make sense to me is two issues. And one is sort of legal and one is sort of moral. So the legal issue is, why can someone with a high school diploma and experience only design a building and be a licensed architect in the state? And then why can someone with any bachelor's degree and 9 years experience be a civil engineer and design a bridge in this state? And why can anyone call themselves an urban designer or a planner and design a half-mile square subdivision with multiple different uses in the state? Yet I can't plant the trees and provide the irrigation to go along with that design. The other issue is the moral issue. There's a reason that the architects and engineers have licensure pathways that are set up that way. It's for the lowest person in society. Not everyone can afford a college degree. Not everyone can go back to school. People graduating with their first degree, they're saddled with debt. There's not enough educational opportunities in this state. I just heard that Mesa College closed. That leaves 4 community colleges. So if you can't afford more than an associate's degree, how can you ever enter this profession? There's only 2 extension certificates. They're in the Bay Area and in Southern California. If you live in rural California, how can you ever enter the profession? You can't. That's the problem. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm hammering on this. If architects and engineers can become licensed and it's not a detriment to their profession, based on experience only, or a related degree, or any degree, why can't landscape architecture do the same? Sorry, I've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm running on fumes. So access, affordability, those are the moral issues. We don't have enough educational opportunities. I would have loved to get a degree in landscape architecture, but I have a family, I work, I have student debt. There's no possibility for me to do it. So the answer is, I'd like answers, and they are. The architects, the engineers, even lawyers. There's a pathway for lawyers, experience only. If you work for a judge or in a certain law office, it's like 6 years and then you can sit for the bar. How come they're all qualified to have these pathways when we aren't? It would be great if education was free and the LAAB could be the standard, but it's not. The standard is an associate's degree. That's the minimum competency in California. UC Berkeley isn't even accredited for their bachelor's degree program. I can't answer the questions about pass rates. I've heard that it's extremely hard, but I thought it was really easy. I breezed through it my first try. And I did the hand grading, I did the hand wrong exam. I just don't understand how we can say that adding people of other backgrounds can make the profession less valuable or reduce our competency. When you bring in other professions, other backgrounds, you're improving the profession. You're adding to it. That's why architects and engineers have these systems. And we should mimic that because it can only improve what we have. So with that, thank you for listening.
I think this is an odd point, but all those are interesting questions, but this is a state law. State law needs defensible reasons to open a state law and review it. What California's architects have and engineers have are different areas than we do, and if the experience is necessary as an option, then I find it interesting, Dustin, that you challenged the experience requirement in the reciprocity as being too much. So one of the things I find here is a real difference. I mean, let's talk about ethical and moral in your question.
Well, I'd like to answer that.
I didn't interrupt you, sir. I was actually to this is, I believe that we need to look at this on the face of it being the law, being defensible, and not necessarily, there are nurses, doctors, and pharmacists that have commonality in their education, and all three of them are licensed. So commonality is not necessarily the reason, or is it defensible? So I'm just begging the committee to consider this as a valid reason to open the law, so that when it's reviewed, those decisions that are made have been taken into consideration, and the defensibility of those changes are there. That is it, I'm thinking, not necessarily comparing us with other licensed individuals. I mean, we can go on and on and on. What we have to do is look at the defensibility of it, and an education subcommittee would be the most reasonable method of doing that. Thank you.
I would like to agree with your point on the education subcommittee. I think that's a great route to go. I would say that the reason we need to amend our current system is so that it is defensible, because I feel that now the way it is not defensible legally. And as far as reciprocity, what was previously proposed resulted in an 18-year experience requirement. When you look at the pre-licensure and post-licensure time required for being in the state, to me that nearly 2 decades of experience seems excessive. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to turn back to the committee.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, we have a question. I'd love to hear the question.
Yeah, I submitted my comment by email. My name is Shanghai. My name is Shanghai. I'm current landscape architect technician because I have an architecture degree. My
I'm
question
going to stop you for a second. It's a lot of noise outside. If you speak a little louder, now everybody can hear you.
Yeah, I'm stuck because I have an architect degree from foreign country, and I try to get validated from the committee, but I find it's very difficult. I already go through CLARK, so I'm a member of the CLARK. I get my experience and education verified by CLARK authorized agency. So go through 8 months for all that because it's overseas. My architecture school was like the top 3 in China. We have very close tie with Columbia. So it's very reputable degree, but it's very hard to get approved here because committee doesn't accept the CLARK's verification. So I was advised to go through CLARK, and the CHAP has their own system. So it seems like I have to register for their exam, which I'm not going to take to get their membership and then go through their procedure. And they have 2 ways to validate it. One is through NAP, and one is through NCARK. And the NAP use one is through the NACS. And then I called NACS. NACS said they don't verify, they don't validate the degree, but they have their members, which are those agencies who do the validation. And the one working for club actually is on their list. So it's the same level validation that what I'm considering. So I have a comment, and I hope that the committee would consider to just choose either validate direct from the NAP or the NACES instead of that we go through the CAP, because that's a different board for different exams. So I wouldn't be stuck for that long. That's all. I have this in email. Thank you. Yes. When did you send it? Yesterday, like 1:30 p.m. Maybe after your deadline. Well, do you mind just for the sake of making sure we have it? Did you have a hard copy with you? Yes, I have one. Would it be okay if we kept it? Thank you very much. Thank you. Just to be safe, right? Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair? Meeting has to conclude at 1:30 or can it go long?
Yeah.
It has to go to 1:30. I mean, you can't extend past 1:30 is what I'm trying to answer.
If it does hurt, we have to rearrange flights, and the next flight's like at 9:30.
Okay, right, okay, so then really the answer is we have to conclude by 1:30. So I'd like to make a suggestion.
They cannot hear you back over here. Sorry.
So we make it work at lunch so that we can continue. Otherwise, we'll have.
Make a recommendation, we take a short break so people can get food if they want, and then we can all eat together.
Chair, I appreciate what Andy said. However, my concern in the meeting as we're being recorded, is anybody going to be able to hear us over all the wrestling in the evening? So should we take a 15, 20-minute lunch break? We'll grab something from somewhere here on campus. I think it's probably better here, 20 or 30. I the discretion of the chair.
Okay, so we're gonna take a 20-minute break, and then we'll reconvene at, at 12:20.